Here's the question. How do you make the impossible possible? Simple. Remove the I am, the ego. Now, how do you step into that newfound possibility? With a series of small intentional steps. Never forget, the greatest among us started from humble beginnings. But to truly unlock your potential, realize you're here for something greater. If you're yearning for more than just a good life, let's take that small step together to reach greatness. Welcome to the Greatness from Small Beginnings podcast, where we're talking to those who have gone from mediocrity to motivated, overlooked to overachieving, forgettable to unforgettable. Are you ready? Let's go. All right, it's time to dig in.
Okay.
This is the Greatness from Small Beginnings podcast.
Okay.
And when I said that to you, you said, "Well, that's my story.
Yeah.
I can talk about that."
Yeah.
And maybe it was that you resonated from the small beginnings, maybe more with the greatness, or maybe there's this whole story that I'm about to find out. But I want to let everybody know this is my friend Ty Krout.
And this is my friend Keith.
Yes, yes. And we are friends. Now, do we hunt together? Well, not yet, but maybe, right? You never know how things go. Do we spend a ton of time together? No. It's mostly interaction at church or church-related things. And there's, that's good. You're part of my community, and I'm grateful for you. When I have some deeper questions, and you've even brought a few to me, which I don't think we even answered any of them in the moment. But the idea is to bring the questions
right
to those that we can trust with the question.
Indeed.
And I'm glad you're on the other side. I trust you, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about your journey.
Okay.
So let's talk about the small beginnings. Where's the beginning? Perhaps go all the way back to where you were born. Just run us through where you've been, when you met your wife, how long's that been going on, and that relationship and all that. And just run through some of that, and then we'll come back and pick some of those things back up. All right?
Okay.
All right.
Well, my family group, the Krout side, extremely big group of people. I'm one of 73 first cousins, but my mom and my dad were very poor. So, they lived in a farm hovel and picked cabbage. My dad went into the military and served in North Africa and Italy. And when he came home, my mom was doing a dime a dance in Vancouver. And so somehow they connected up.
A dime a dance. Okay.
And
that's a concept, a thought I haven't thought of in a long time.
Yeah.
Saw it on a movie.
Yeah.
Just not a thing that I know of anymore, does it?
She was married already. Mm-hmm. And the guy that she married was doing the play around. Mm-hmm. And my mom couldn't handle that. So she divorced him. She was pregnant. And the funny thing is, just in the last 2 days, Wendy and I have submitted our DNA, got the results back, and we've been looking at, where and how the connections are all made, because I only know the side of the story that my mom or my dad told me. I don't know anybody else's part.
Sure, yeah.
And so we've discovered some interesting.
So where did all this happen? Vancouver, you said.
Yeah, Vancouver.
Okay.
So Dad came home from the military to Orchards, and my grandfather had a 6 mile by 6 mile square unit of land that he raised mules on from early 1900 and on. And then he would drive those mules all the way as far as Montana to be used for the Northern Pacific Railroad. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so my dad meets my mom. There's chemistry, obviously. Guy comes home from war, and really distasteful war, what happened in northern Italy. and ended up being in Naples. My dad was a supportive first generation immigrant who, when I guess he could maybe be second, but my grandmother came from Germany.
Okay.
And then he was here. I think that's first generation. He was born here.
Okay. I don't know how they quantify that.
Yeah. But, he was very conscientious about hurting people, about shooting at people. And so they jailed him at the CCC camp up by Forks and for almost a year. And then he said, well, I'm perfectly willing to be a medic. And so they sent him to North Africa when he entered the military as a medic. So he was what we call in today's terms a conscientious objector.
Okay.
But they found a job for him, which he was ready to do. And the result of which was if there was an ethnic group that was really, really frowned upon, it was Japanese Americans who had come over in the 442nd Infantry Battalion, and they were just doing great things to help us win the war over the Axis. And so, but the issue was that one of those guys would get wounded out in the field, and no one would know. Most of the Americans would just, he's on his own.
Yeah.
Because at the time that this was happening, we'd already had Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. They were in, but they were kind of the enemy.
Yeah. But my dad was like, oh no, I'll help him. So he literally started this thing where he would go out on the battlefield and take the worst guy, haul him back in a wheeled trolley, do surgery on him because the surgeons wouldn't touch him, and then save his life. So I don't know what year. I've tried to figure it out, but sometime in those years, he came across a guy that had been through and through with a 20 millimeter. And so my dad saved his life. And he took the initiative to actually do a reconstructive surgery, and did it so successfully that this guy survived and lived until I was in high school, and he came to America and I got to meet him. And so just like if you were American or modern, if your name was William, and your buddies would just hate to say William, they would call you Bill. And his name was Ty Gumakuchi, his first name. And so my dad only knew him as Ty because even his Japanese American counterparts called him Ty. And so my dad comes home to Orchards, and my mom has her baby. And then 6 years later, my mom conceives. And so my dad says, well, if it's a boy, I'm naming him after this guy, Ty. And he goes, I don't even know how to spell his name. And I'm like, come on. In my mind, right?
Yeah.
But the only name that he could think of was Ty Cobb.
Yeah, of course.
And so he spelled my name Ty, T-Y. And but the irony of him saving this guy's life and then naming me after Ty Cobb, who in the last 3 years of his life comes to faith in Christ and then eventually succumbs to stomach cancer. What a great legacy.
Yeah,
Here's a guy that when he was in his 20s, if you dipped your fingers into the bathtub that he was going to go into just to see how warm the water was, he could kill you for that. And he would. And he often beat people to death for beating him into the tub. And so Ty Cobb's kind of an interesting, I've studied it because It's my
You
namesake.
wondered, right?
Yeah. But
Makes sense.
later in life, I was able to look up the 442nd guys and figure out who the guy is. And then it dawned on me, that guy came to our house when I was in high school. And, I didn't know it at the time. I didn't make a lot of sense. But anyway,
that's going a ways back, like where your name came from.
Yeah. So
I would assume though that's had an effect. Like since you were interested in it, it's had an effect. Right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
And we lived in, I didn't know that there was an ethnic group called Trailer Trash. I didn't know anything. I was completely like I am now. Things go over my head like crazy. Yeah. But we lived in a mobile home until I was in 7th grade, and a trailer, 8 feet wide, 40 feet long,
in a park.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we moved it whenever we moved. And we lived at Barnes Court in Vancouver. And there was a bus that would come around on Sundays and pick up kids, take them to church. And, that was real common in the early 60s.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of my habits was get up in the morning before everybody else was awake, wander around the trailer park, and get in trouble. Do good things, do whatever.
Yeah, do something.
Do something. And so this bus picks me up, and I start going to church. And on October 1st, 1961, I heard the guy say, you need to be saved or you're lost. And I was, what do you mean lost? And he explained that. And I went into a private room and I got on my knees and I asked Christ into my life.
By yourself?
No. With the leader.
Okay.
And that'd be a story. But he was very good at knowing about me. I was sure I wasn't going to get into the kingdom because I had stolen the lunch money from the desk next to me at school. This is 1st grade, by the way. And
life of crime.
And then I had to life of crime. And I'd also taken some food out of his desk because we just didn't have that stuff. I didn't have extra money and I didn't have extra food. And so this was like, hey, free for all.
Yeah.
And so I made amends. Yeah, I mean, my dad was adamant that I had to do that. And, knowing cognitively now about all that he was as an individual and loving different people groups, ethnic groups, it's a wonder he didn't tan my hide. But he was so kind, so gentle. How much money did you take? Okay. Now, how are you going to earn that money back? And
I paid for a broken window once. Very similar.
Yeah.
I threw a rock and this is a bad deal. And Dad took me over there and we figured it out. And, well, thank God for fathers that are willing to drag their kids into this. Let's get it fixed.
At the same time that my mother was giving birth on January 1st, 1955, 6 days before, Wendy's mom was given birth in Portland, and we lived in Rufus and Dalesport.
Yeah.
And my mom went over the river to Oregon and gave birth in the hospital at the Dalles. And then at the end of the holiday season, Wendy's birth record and my birth record headed for Portland, Multnomah County. And so, when I met Wendy, a believer, within 2 weeks, I said, I'm in this for marriage. If you're not in it for marriage, I'm done. And she said, I'm in it for marriage. So we were courting almost the whole time that we were getting to know each other for a year plus before we actually got married.
How old were you?
We were 18.
18. Okay.
Well, actually, we were 17, and then we got married when we were 19.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm a little sketchy on the details. I was a happy camper.
Yeah, of course. The important thing, you got to where you wanted to be.
So when time came for us to get married, I knew a lot about her. I knew her pastor. I knew the pastor that had witnessed her coming to faith and her lifestyle. And so I had a lot of confidence. We go down to the courthouse, and in those years you had to have a blood test, and you had to have your birth certificate. So we went down there to the courthouse, and we asked these ladies at the counter for our records. And they go to the back, and they are just like a whole bunch of old chickens back there going crazy, like everybody's had eggs. And they said, "Oh, no, you have to come and see this. This doesn't happen very often." So we go back there, and they've got these gigantic books, and there's records, 2 birth certificates, 3 down. I don't know. They're big.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure I don't know if they're still there. They're digitized at least. And on one page is Wendy, and on the other page is Ty.
Oh, my.
They've been like that the whole of our lives to that point.
Meant to be.
I know. And so we got married, and I distinctly remember telling Wendy, caution, I've been a believer since 61, and I'm sort of confident that their pastoral role is in my DNA, but I don't know when and where it's going to take place. Her dad, Les, you remember Les Busby, he grilled me big time. I asked 5 times, and he said yes on the 5th time.
Finally.
And I had to delineate. I had to learn to delineate my, what was my plan, and he. The funny thing is, the things that I told him, I'm going to go to Oregon State. I'm going to get in the military, go to Oregon State. I'm going to get into engineering. I'm going to do engineering, raise my family. And I never thought about it after that. And so Wendy and I just started. We did what was normal for couples. We started having kids, and we had 5 children, and only 4 of them were surviving. And so between number 3 and number 4, live birth, there was a stillbirth. And so we had 4, and then when John was born, the last one, he had a birth defect, and so we looked at each other. We knew the scope of the birth defect could be horrible. And so we said, we're fortunate to have John. He's whole. He needed a surgery like in 4 hours to correct this bubble in his spinal brain cavity. And it's called spinal bifida. And but we survived that. He survived that. And we decided, maybe it'd be better not to have any more kids. And it was a tough decision because, I wanted 12.
Yeah. I have my own side to that same story, as you can imagine.
Yeah, but you got closer than I did.
I did get closer, yeah. Yeah, 7. We got to our 5th and pregnant with the 6th. And I'm like, we're actually pretty good at this. The parenting thing.
Yeah.
And something else too, but
go ahead, tell me about that.
But we thought, this is natural for us, this whole thing. And maybe we just keep going. Well, Elaine had some issues on the 7th, and I pictured what it would be like, me raising 6 boys and a girl by myself. Yeah. And I've seen families that did that, and I said, I cursed. Absolutely not. No, not happening.
Yeah.
No. So she did say that, no, we're time to be done. And I'm like, good. Because that picture in my mind of me Like you have an eighth and you don't survive. Oh, that picture was bad.
Yeah.
So I needed her. So we made the decision.
So Wendy had, the regular old tie the tubes and all that. And I kept hoping that, her tube tying would be bad. We'd have another one. But, I tried. I gave it my best.
Way to go, Tom.
But it just didn't happen. So we got 4. And now we have 10 grandchildren and 3
awesome.
great-grandchildren. And on the work side of life, I made it to senior equipment engineer, project manager for Panasonic America, West Coast. And so I was flying around everywhere from, who knows, Arizona to Washington. And my annual budget was about $425 million. My largest building project was $1.7 billion. I still don't know why. I know why, because all the relational things. Wendy and I couldn't go to the store. We couldn't go grocery shopping without 10, 20, 30 people cornering me and thanking me, for, bringing them and keeping them and
at least saying hi or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. It was, it was wonderful. And I think it was good for Wendy because, even in those years, my PTSD I can see little pieces of it, but Wendy was always probably wondering, I wonder how he does with that situation because, I know what he does at home. And so Panasonic or Massachusetts Electric International decided they weren't going to hold us in a employment picture anymore. So they laid off about 7,000, and I was one of those. And it didn't come with it came with a huge financial benefit. And so we took that benefit. We came to Portland, and I started working at Hillsboro and youth pastoring in Tacoma. So it's going back and forth every week. And
almost 3 hours.
Yeah.
2.5 to 3 hours.
I remember telling Wendy, clear as a bell, I've given my last minute to this industry of making computer chips. And so we're gonna make a transition. So I started over at Triquint in Hillsboro, and they're now Corvo. And I brought with me a mountain of technology that they hadn't used for their product. Their product is affectionately known as a one-way device. And so while phones were operating at that time at like G3, G4, their devices were running at G10, 11, and 12. And it took a whole different fabrication process to build these communication devices that would help and be successful. And so I brought them a huge, big package of database, and all of it was transitioned. Like I would walk into a machine and I'd watch the production engineer say, well, I'd really like it to be, and I'd look at his paper and go, well, here, let me help you with that. And then I'd get on the machine and program it, and then they would test their product and be close or not, or right on. And then they would, but it was an engineering role that I felt was easy to slip into. I didn't have a signed non-disclosure agreement from Panasonic or MEI. And so I was, I'm going to say free, but I was cautious. So I never went and said, let me write that out for you and sign my name on it, because guess what? That was too close to the line.
You brought your knowledge base.
I brought my knowledge base. I helped them with their equipment. One of my
And you
fun.
were pastoring at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, youth pastor. And so then in 2002, I made the decision that I was going to use sick time and vacation time, and I was going to start going to school at Multnomah.
Mhm.
And I figured I could make the first 12 months.
Just to be clear, it was Bible school, right?
Yeah, Multnomah University.
Yeah, right.
So that I could pursue pastoral stuff.
Yeah.
And so Ty Krout was going through some inner process of not changing, but thinking of a reduction in force. And so I went to the vice president, who was a Catholic guy, and I said, David, look, here's my plan. And I showed him how I was going to drain my sick time by making it to class, and drain my vacation time by making it to class. And that at the end of about a year, you'd probably have to let me go because I'm so unreliable. But I said, I felt like I could give you, a significant benefit. And so we, as a process of me going to Ty Krout and being there as an employee and making stock purchases, we had about 4,500 shares, which at the time that that David said, okay, you're done, goodbye.
So he kind of went with the plan?
He went with the
Okay.
No, he didn't go with the plan. He just said, the best thing for you to do would be to exit now. So I'm going to lay you off and say goodbye. I mean, there's nothing left for you to transition in terms of product. So I just want you to go with my blessing. And oh, by the way, the shares of stock that you have, they're worth about $70 a piece.
Oh, man. Nice.
And so once I'm out of the company, I have to wait like a certain amount of time. And then this window opens up to spend it. And so we gained some financial footing. And at that point, it was 2002. And a whole bunch of people in my community of believers, pastors, youth pastors, Randy Steele, Charlie Fisher from Lentz Baptist, which is where Dr. Johnson was at. They were all, I would go somewhere with Wendy and they'd be there. And then he'd say, have you thought about Multnomah?
Yeah.
You really need to think about them. And so Wendy went and did her associates at Portland State, and then she did a bachelor's at Multnomah. And I felt it was important, if I was going to pastor, that she have credentials as well as myself, because I was going to the seminary. So I did the first, I think this is tracking with my story, but we'll see, after you rewind it and play it back.
Yeah.
But after the first 18 months, it was obvious to me that my work ethic and my abilities to be a student and a learner were just solid, and that there were lots of kids, and I use that term affectionately, lots of kids in those classes at Multnomah that just, they couldn't write a one-page anything if they tried.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is horrible for them. And in the meantime, Dr. Brake, who was the seminary president, he saw me, watched me do what I do. Let me sit down with me and I'll help you. Now, when did you start this? Was it at the beginning of the semester or in the middle or in the last day? And he said, we, as a faculty, they appoint a student body president. And I was like, I don't think I got time for that. I'm a student, Yeah. And so they appointed me as a student body president. I held that for 3.5 years. And in that time, the students, the number of long-term relationships is just, it's a big bundle. And the success stories that came out of that is just a testimony that I wasn't there just to gain, the knowledge of Hebrew, the knowledge of Greek, and how to manage and operate a church. And especially as a youth pastor, I was saying that on purpose.
Yeah.
And in the last 2 semesters, I had a class, cross-cultural Christianity. And the professors for that class were Dr. Steele, that we know, and Dr. Steele, Terry and Dwight. Yeah. And so it comes to the final of that class. And Dr. Dwight has all these little pieces of paper. So you walk up to the front of the class, he hands you the paper, and you get 30 minutes to respond. So good luck,
Paper
and
with a question or a subject on it.
Yeah.
Paper.
Yeah. You just have to wax eloquent. And I was at the end of the line. I was like, I wasn't nervous because I'm a talker.
Yeah.
You couldn't tell that, could you? And he calls me up and I go to the front and he hands me my paper and he has kind of this smile. And I don't know how much you remember about Dwight, but when he's got you cornered and he's pulling on the rope that he's going to hang you with to tighten it up around your neck, and he's just waiting for the trap door and then you're done. He has this little grin. And I didn't think there was anything up until I opened it up and I read to the class my question. You've just been accepted as senior pastor at a church where everybody in the church is age 60 and older. And how do you put Christianity in the context of them so that they continue to grow and bring others to faith? And I'm standing there and I know I got to perform. This is a performance thing. And so I think I remember distinctly thinking, I wish I could take time to pray because nobody else did that. And I was thinking, it's just too bad that they're going to have to listen to me pray. And I said, let's pray. Yeah. Because this is for a senior pastor. I'm going to continue to be a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor at Lentz for quite a few years. And
so you passed, I assume.
So I prayed.
You prayed.
And I did pass. But I prayed and then I talked about the kind of things that I felt that a senior pastor would have to pay attention to if he was going to. I've always felt that Dwight had inside knowledge in the first church that was going to call me, but I don't really have proof of that. But the first job offer I got was senior pastor, First Baptist Church, South Bend. Everybody in there was 65 and older. And, and I will say this,
preparation.
Out of all fairness, it only took them 60 months, 5 years to get tired of me saying, let's go down to the bridge and feed those homeless people. And then they said, we just aren't going to do that. So thanks, but no thanks. And, but out of that 60 months came huge, monstrous, new abilities, relationships that are just massive. And, I could just tell you story after story of
kind of a patience, kind of a longer view to things, I assume.
Yeah. Like, okay, I'll tell you one.
Okay.
This is just.
I got some other questions that I got to get back to. So there we go.
I'm preaching. Guy walks in the back and he sits down at the very back pew. From there, from the pulpit, I could smell him. It was pretty small. It was pretty smelly. And after church, he comes up to me, and I'm not I don't barf when I smell bad things. I'm a professional trapper during college, so hey, I got to go home and do taxidermy work on some of the stuff from hunting, and I know it's been almost 2 weeks on one of the game heads, and I know it's going to be stinko, but I'm not bothered by it at all. I didn't do it today because I didn't want to sit here with my hands offending you. But this guy's name was Stephen. Turns out he's the son of one of the guys in the church. When he was age 17, he started truck driving back and forth across the U.S., delivering here, delivering there. And the only real reading that he knew how to do was road signs and, where does it say sign here on a bill of lading? And I said, well, how can I help you, Stephen? And he goes, I want you to teach me to read, and I want to read from the Bible. Okay, well, we can do that. So what day of the week's good for you? And he said, Tuesdays. And I said, fine, on Tuesdays, be in my office at 9 a.m, and we will start you down the path. So I'm thinking, start in the New Testament where, there's not a lot of hard names, hard grammar,
right,
all that.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, no, I'm reading it from Genesis forward. And I said, are you sure?
Yeah.
I said, Genesis is a big chunk of
it. And then you get a couple books in and it gets a little bit boring.
Oh, yeah. Then there's Leviticus.
And then there's Leviticus, which is as dry as a mothball.
So
in some spots, I'll say.
So he learns to read in my vision. And I made a rule. Anytime you finish a book, you have to take a 3x5 card and you have to write 9 words or less about that book. It could be a sentence. It could be just reflective words. And then you have to keep that until sometime later you read it again and you maybe add another word or change a word, whatever you want to do. It's your stuff.
Part of that tool. I like that.
And so it was just unbelievable that we reached Malachi, the end of the Old Testament. And he hands me a 3x5 card and it has 2 words on it. And I was like, oh, listen, he goes, here's my 2-word summary. And I'm like, 2 words? You're going to need all 9, And he looked at me teary-eyed and he said, stupid Jews. And I said, well, can you unwrap that a little for me? And he said, well, God said, don't even bother to come in with your sacrifice because I won't be there to take it. And I was like, from the guy that started with me at Genesis 1:1 to the guy now, I remember some of those chapters in Genesis where it's name after name after name, the genealogies. He just struggled to phonetically put vowels and consonants in English. Forget about it if I tried to teach him Hebrew.
Oh my goodness.
But anyways, and then we went all the way through Revelation, and he hands me a card and he says, 1 word. I said, okay, what's the word? He says, victory.
Oh.
I was just, it's still as fresh and crazy good. From a guy who was a truck driver to reflect on scripture. And did I tell you when we started this, he was 43 years old.
Oh, man.
So all of those years, 26 years of driving, and he comes back and and I can't remember when it was, but somewhere in the middle of the New Testament, he said, I'm really sure that I have Jesus here in me. He said, what do I do with that?
Oh, that's a great question.
I was like, well, let me help you out.
What a great question. We should all ask ourselves that almost every day.
Every day, yeah. And I said, you need to keep reading.
Oh, yeah.
It'll come.
Yeah.
He gets to Acts And he said, will you go down with me to the bridge this week? He said, there are people down there that need it bad. And so I went down there, and there was a couple. I can say this. I had permission.
Yeah.
She was the direct heiress to the Hearst legacy. She was 24 or so. She was pregnant. He was some guy she met at a swap meet.
Oh, no.
And they were together. And so, we worked out how they might get married. And, that was his victory, was bringing them out of the dirt and slime and squalor that is under the bridge living.
Mm-hmm.
And then strangely, about 2 years after we left South Bend, which was in 2011, so we had come to Montevilla, and I get the word that he's got liver cancer, and he wants me to come and visit him, and so I do, and he's just over the top thankful, and I'm over the top thankful for him, because in the cross-cultural part of being a pastor to an older congregation is, are you doing anything? What are you going to do today? How about tomorrow? How about this week? Give me a plan. And here's this guy whose only plan was at age 43 was to just drive the truck and get it to the next location. And now he's done with that. And then 6 years later or so, he's at the end of life, and he's just rejoicing over all of the great things that God has done. And his father had gifted to him the property that he was on, so he divided it into 5 pieces, 5 1-acre plots, and he found homeless people and put it in their name. And then, just really
legacy
community guy.
Yeah.
And that's just one story
of multiples.
Of multiple.
I love the victory. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I just
sum it up. Let's sum it up. It's victory.
Yeah.
So you mentioned PTSD earlier.
Yes. So I'm a Vietnam era veteran, so I never went to combat. I have stressors. That's what the military terms as an event that creates a problem for you mentally or physically or whatever. And my first stressor was I was wow, how do I start this? I went through training, and there were 700 guys in our training group. I was one of 6 at the top. So I got promoted from E1 to E3, didn't even know about being a soldier because I was one of the best. And so when I got to my first duty unit, which was, I was a control tower operator, and I worked in a MAST unit, medical air surgical team that would respond on I-5. We were at Fort Lewis, and you rescue people up on the mountain, down on the highway, didn't matter. And then I went to the air cav. When I got to the air cav, I was in this cycle where they would call up and they would say, we need a communication specialist to come and make these radios capable, or communication centers. And so I went to Painfield, which is an extension of Fort Lewis, where they have CH-47, which is two blades, and a big, huge, big thing. And they had a command and control communications console in there, and all classified, And so you can't make those units, those communication units, viable until the wheels are up. So you can't just set it down in a flight yard or flight line and say, okay, I'll go out there and work on that one sitting right there. It doesn't work that way. It has to be in the air, functional aircraft, then communicate. So I get in this aircraft and I'm communicating. I don't know where we were, how far off the ground we were, but you know, I'm sitting at a console, and right in front of me is this wall, and behind that, on the other side of that wall, is the co-pilot, and I can actually see the face and head of the pilot on this side, and there's a walkway and a door over there and a door out the back. And the crew chief, I'm only going to tell you the part that I remember. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the story is variegated. So I remember he said, the crew chief grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled me back. And at that point, you know, I'm trying to protect the classified equipment. You know, I'm not sure what's going on. And he says, we're on fire. You need to get out of the aircraft. And so I look from my chair. I look up like this, and man, there were smoke and flames right above my head. So I just pivot out of the chair, and I'm like thinking, I don't have a white phosphorus grenade, which is always sitting right where you're at, so that if the enemy or somebody, you pull the pin and drop it on the equipment and you walk away because it's all going to get burned up.
Yeah.
And there was nothing. So I just jumped up and decided I was running out the back door. And at that point, the floor of the CH-47 went like this. And it pushed me against the pilot side of the aircraft. And then in my mind, I was falling to the tarmac and rolling. And I looked back and I realized that, you know, I was the only one out of that aircraft. So I ran back in that same door and I helped the co-pilot out, and the pilot and the crew chief made it out before I did. And we all ran out onto the tarmac, and at just about the same time, I don't know how, this aid car comes out and we pile into the back of it and we go away. And
So one helicopter crash.
that's just one.
That's just one of
two.
Okay.
So we survive it. And of course, later on in life, I get to see the pictures. It was, 40 minutes of sobbing. How did I get out of that alive? The actual chair that I was in is in the picture, and there's nothing around it anymore. It's just molten everything.
Yeah.
It's a whole engineering story as to how the tilting, and when I got to where I was here, the aircraft, because of the rotation, the body of the aircraft went like this, and it just spit me out.
So let's get into the second one.
The second one.
And you and I have talked about angels and miracles. And
oh, man.
Honestly, we could go deep and go here a long time.
Yeah.
But the listeners probably don't need to go down that trail with us. But
right. So the second one is I was at airfield in Yakima Firing Center. And we were, through all of the things that were happening, we were coming home. And as we came over Mount Rainier, we were right at about 10,000 feet. And we started icing up. I made Mayday calls because we knew we were going down. And then pilot Paul McMichael, Chief Warrant Officer, sitting there in the pilot seat. And if it had been anybody else, I guarantee you we'd have all died. But this guy, shot down 9 times in combat over Vietnam. He doesn't have a no button. It's all yes. And so we auto rotate. He gets the searchlight on. We go from 10,000 to about 6,400. And he's got his boot shoved in the door so he can work the pitch and the tilt of the, and he's looking out like this, trying to make it so he can see what's under us. And he finds a white patch of snow in the first week of August.
Oh my goodness.
And he finds this snow patch and he goes, okay, if there's snow like that, there's no trees. And we plop down in this thing And, you know, I don't think I wet my pants or anything like that, but it's possible. Because let me tell you, so we pre-flighted, F-14 flew over and we pre-flighted, flew that aircraft back to Gray Army Airfield, and the forks underneath, which, you know, they could be like that, were like that. So we hit pretty hard, and my job was to pre-flight from the crew cabin all the way to the tail rotor, and I couldn't find even a scratch.
Wow. That's
And so the next day, I'm sitting at my duty station, which is flight ops track, the guy that keeps track of the flights. And I'm sitting there, and I'm having a hard time focusing because we didn't get home. I didn't get home until about 1 a.m. It was dark, by the way, when all this happened. And Mac walked
unfortunate
in.
he could even see the snow.
Mac walks in, and he throws a pair of spurs on my desk. This is in the air cav. And in the cav, when you survive a significant event, it's been since the 1700s, it's an award given by your compatriots is to hand you get spurred. And so he hands me the spurs, and he goes, "The spurs are nothing." He said, "The only reason we made it through that is because you were on that flight." I was like, okay. And so I think about a year ago, I actually had a phone conversation with him, and he goes, "Krout," he goes, "I'm 85. And I still think it was because of you that we made it out of that."
Okay, why'd you say that?
And, you know, I mean, there was a lot of faith and a lot of me saying, "What are you guys going to church this weekend?" Or, you know, really just trying to get them to see perspective from, and
So they assumed at very least that you were a praying man.
Yeah.
And that you were protected somehow by God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that carried over.
It did.
Right.
And
I've actually have some stories like we won't get into all of them, but I have the same stuff.
yeah. So, you know, that was the second helicopter flight. I lost my hearing for about 90 days. And during the time that I lost my hearing from 50 caliber gunfire on a range in practice to qualify, the U.S. Army said, you know, what you've done in school to be number one. Actually, I was one of 9 in the world at the time. That's counting all services. With the abilities that I ended up finding and developing, we're going to keep you in, even if you're disabled. And so I was like, what if I can't hear? I mean, well, that's okay because we're not going to use Morse code anymore. That was just a joke. And I'm like, come on. How many hours? 10-hour days for weeks in a row. But they
using Morse code.
Yeah, using Morse code and learning to do it and getting your brain to think it like idiomatic English. And so we survived that.
Yeah, that's incredible. So the question is, after all of that.
Yeah, what was the question?
After all of that, then you move to into the technology sector.
Yep.
Then you move into pastoring.
Yep.
So you mentioned that Wendy wondered how all that was going. And then was it hard when you were in that? There's a pressure cooker in that technology because you have these big budgets, they're responsible, it's capital improvements, it's big projects, and there's pressure. Believe me, I know.
Yeah.
There's pressure. How'd you handle that? And then how does that affect your faith as you go into pastoring and all that? Certain things are natural for us, but the things that aren't create more pressure. So unfold that a little bit for us.
We had a Japanese vice president who came to help us build this plant in Puyallup. And him and I got a personal invitation to go out and do gardening with him. And remember, that's how the Japanese unwrap their day, relax, find centering. I'm not sure how they put it in, maybe their terms or their worldview. But in my worldview, I was like, well, just do what I can with this guy because he's paying the bills. And if I don't have, in those years, if I needed an extra 50 million, it had to go through him. And that happened often. It wasn't a small thing. And he knew that when I came and said, look, we need 45, we need 35, we need whatever. I didn't just.
Wasn't a random number.
I had the spreadsheets, I had the figures, I had it all. And, but he, a Japanese leader comes to America away from homeland with his entourage, which includes his extra women and his the guys who are his secretaries, which would never be a woman. And I would ask him, how do you manage like having 3 women here and 1 woman at home? Doesn't she ever? Oh, no, we don't have that in our culture. They know their role. They know that she's there with the kids, and these ladies are here to keep me from being bored and whatever. And so there was a part where I got to kind of talk to him a little bit about my worldview and faith. And at the very end, there was a project that had to be done. When you get occupancy in a house, it's pretty much plumbing, electrical, water, roof, siding. You don't even have to paint the thing anymore, and you can move in. And but in a large, 350,000 square foot semiconductor fab, occupancy is a completely different animal. And they were struggling with that. And he comes down and he carries a crop everywhere he goes. When he's mad, he just slams the table with it. And he comes over to my side of the table. This is a senior meeting. This is not. And he slams it down next to my left arm. It lands right there. And my ears ring. But he says, we're giving this one to Ty. Completely not what I expected. I expected my good friend John or my good friend Doug to get it, and it was going to be over with. But it came to me. And so, I had electrical, mechanical, and architectural, engineer. I had all those were in my pocket. Those were the people that I managed. And so I had the mechanical and I had the architectural. So, within half an hour of that, I had all of those heads sitting in a room, and we made a plan. I said, you've got till like 3:00 today to come up with not just the plan, but what it's going to cost us. I need to give a number, and I need that number to be reasonably accurate. So we've been doing this for 3 years. You've got all of this database, so you know the labor costs, the contract costs, the mechanical and the parts and pieces parts. Yeah. Let's just figure it out quickly and get it done, and I'm trusting that you can do that. And so we did it, and in 5 days, 5 business days, we received our occupancy. And I had guys working around the clock, 24 hours a day, and we came in well over $50 million under what we were supposed to have needed to spend. But we had his resources. And so one of the things he asked me was, how did you cut cost? And I said, well, first of all, it was days involved. Time is money.
Time is money.
And the next thing was we had motivated workforce that was ready to do the work. And on any day, I would just go down to the local store and I would buy like 1,500 Bismarcks with Custer, chocolate covered. And they'd be in boxes, fill a room. And then I would take them to the guys. My efficiency rating was well over 100% for my workforce.
So
And
let me sum up some of what you've said.
and I would pray before they got to have their Bismarcks.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
so
there was always a faith component with you.
yeah,
Always. Since
yeah.
you were young.
Yeah.
And service to people, treating them like they were important also.
Indeed.
So this is, I see the thread going through this whole thing, right? So
When I was in like third grade, we didn't have a teacher for our Sunday school class. And so I went to our pastor, Melvin Erickson, and I said, Pastor E, why can't I teach that class? I mean, when I think about it now, for a 9-year-old to say, I really want to be the teacher, that's sort of over the
yeah, it's a little over the top.
a little over the top. He says, I'll tell you what, you come down here for a couple hours on Saturday. We'll go over the lesson. We'll go over how you're going to teach it. Then you teach it on Sunday. And I have a picture of me with the Sunday school class. And we went through the minor prophets. And so it's nothing new for me. This is, when you think about how did God create me for whatever is on the shelf for me? I mean, whatever the
greatness. I was headed there. Like,
the
what
card.
greatness has he
Here's the cards, buddy. Now start playing the game with what I give you.
So what greatness has he created you for? There's a question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, it's presenting faith to unbelieving people, and I'm just going to throw out some numbers. So calm down.
Calm down.
Take your chill pill. In the year 2003, between May 1st and September 1st, 123 students at summer camps prayed to receive Christ. I led most of them in a prayer to help them come to faith in Christ. I don't know all the details of their lives. That's up to their pastors or the church that they came from, which all got a letter, said, Johnny and Susie prayed to receive Christ. Will you watch over them? The most unbelievable, successful come to faith story is I was called upon to respond to a private school in Tacoma to bring them a chapel message after a huge problem in the student body. So I go in there and I decide, let me rephrase that. Even though my decision process appears to be mine, Spirit of God's got something going.
We know that's not completely true.
Yeah.
If it came out good, it wasn't all.
Yeah. Then I know it's not me.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And I decided to do this because I'm an engineer. I have all these ideas. And this one I've been working on a while. I finally got it all to fruition. It's going to be, I'm going to take a piece of paper with the words not visible, but they're visible on the back. I'm going to use a Fresnel lens. It's going to flip it around and flip it upside down. And on the screen, you're going to be able to read the words that are on the back, upside down and backwards. And I put it up there, and it says, prayer changes things. And there are kids in the room. This is 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classes. And there was, I'm going to say 350 kids in this chapel.
Okay.
And I completely forgot to say, if you want to pray silently to yourself. This was a GARB chapel school, General Regular Baptist.
Okay.
And in their process, if you're praying, you pray out loud. So the Spirit of God, chink, that one's done. They're going to pray out loud. And guess what? You're going to get blown off your feet. And so I say, dear God, I give the invitation, and then I say, say these words. Should have been silently to yourself, but hey, Spirit of God's at work. And I hear all of these kids say, dear God, and I'm talking a little about kids, a lot of them. And then I walk them through the prayer of salvation. I get to the end, and I say, in Jesus' name, amen. Now I said, I want all of you to stay standing. Oh, they also stand.
Okay.
And I look across the room, and there's just kids standing in every quarter of this room. And I said, okay, now teachers, you got to look at the students that are in your classroom, and you got to know which ones are praying, because you're going to need to unwrap this with them. And
Yeah, right.
and so I get the numbers back. 127 kids who've been brutalized by their classmates in the upper levels spiritually. Prayed to receive Christ on one day. Up until that point, if you would have said, hey, Ty, what's your spiritual gifts? I would have said, well, knowing the scriptures, prayer life, but evangelism moved to the top of the list. Then there are students in the high school. We had about 80 to 100 kids in our high school group at our church. And I'd prepare a message from my heart, and not knowing at all about which kinds of students would be there. This one girl, she's goth, heavy goth, and piercings all over. And I give an invitation, and one of our counselor parents talks to her and leads her to faith. And I didn't know any of those details until like the middle of 4 or 5 days later, when I was down working, and Wendy says, hey, let me tell you about this. I said, okay. So she tells me. And so I come back to church the next week, and it is towards the end of the school year, like in April or May or something. And the senior pastor wants me to have students who want to be baptized. And she says that she wants to be baptized now. Well, I have no problem with that. None whatsoever. So I go to the senior pastor and I say, I need the baptistry this week for the student. And so she comes to church. I am up the front, looking out at the audience, and she walks in. I don't even recognize her. No more piercings. Beautiful red dress. A polite, covered up dress, as opposed to her goth clothing, or lack thereof. And so we go into the back, and the lady who led her to faith helps her get all ready for the baptism, and she comes out, and I'm in there and in the tank. And I said, would you like to tell everybody your story? And, she's only had a week to go from drug-using goth to talking like a human being, and maybe even a believer, if you want to say that. And she says, I've been into a lot of bad stuff. I'm using an S word because there was other words she used.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any gas. There wasn't any wailing of teeth, and gnashing of teeth. But the people just accepted her. And she goes, I am here today to stand my ground against the enemy. And I am going to be baptized so that and I know that I'm here and I'm real, and it's faith in me. I baptize her, and I'm thinking, what on earth can she do? Because, hey, what do I got? I don't have knowledge. And I get a call from Wendy. She goes, we have a problem. She's been arrested. And I said, okay, what did she get arrested for? Because, you know, it could be she slipped back, she this, she that. Well, at their school, Lakewood High School, in the hours before class, the students would sell drugs at the flagpole. That was their ground. And she decided that she was going to take back the flagpole for Christ. And it became, they not only had a guitar singer, because the guitar was busted over one of the druggies' heads, and then it became a regular thing every week for them to go to the bottom of that flagpole and worship. And then, I don't know if it was a month or so, but a few weeks later, the counselor gets a hold of me on my youth pastor day and says, I really need you to come and talk to me because I got to understand what's going on. I'm not a Christian. Yeah. So I go to him and I tell him, okay, well, this is, you know, from what you saw of her, goth, to what you see of her now, that's the Spirit of God at work in her life to change her. I can't change that. I can't even direct it. All I can do is say, this is who she is now. And if I dare you, I dare you to stand in her way. I said, because I'm not putting any limits on it. And, but you know, those great victories from all corners. And,
now is that kind of an antithesis of your life? God just keeps rotating these cool things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you and I talk, my goodness.
Yeah.
You share a story. We've been going a long time. So we're gonna wrap up. But anyway, I could tell stories that you've told me and like amazing, right?
Yeah.
And we both have them. It's the best part is that
when
he doesn't just give you them, he doesn't give me them. He provides amazing things for those who are in his
when a person's
community.
Cognitive engineering, spiritually attuned mind goes, how did that happen?
How did that happen?
Because I know it wasn't me, and I know there's nobody else around, and there's only one explanation why a 650-pound stone didn't fall on and crush me.
Exactly.
That's
the
only
one of the stories I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I got moved by an angel. Literally moved.
Literally, yeah.
Okay. So to wrap up, God is great. Right?
Amen.
And God's done great things through you. And you've humbly said, wasn't me. Okay. But he's a pathway to greatness. Right? He is in everything great. Like I think, you know, all good things come from God. Well, I kind of think that word falls short in English. There's like good that's just too small a word.
Okay, let me teach a little just for a second.
All right.
Jesus said to the guy who said, good teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus said to him, why do you call me good? Because only God is good. Mm-hmm. And he was really, it was a question to get him to say, you've called me good, and that means I'm God. And
so it is bigger.
It's the good. So in the New Testament, good is different than what we use it for today. But yeah.
Well, that being said, here's how I like to kind of wrap up. So you're gonna picture crawling through this microphone. You're sitting in the car with somebody that's listening to this, walking. Somebody's got
earbuds. Yep.
Yeah. Or they're viewing it on YouTube, like at their house. And you have 30 seconds to a minute. And I know that's hard for you, right? So
he's joking, right?
Yeah. You got 30 seconds to a minute because for some reason there's an expiration, right? And you're going to sum it up.
Yeah.
You've talked about your life. You've talked about all this. What's the thing you're going to say? What are you going to tell them?
don't think there's a way you can know what God's going to do until you start doing something and then let him do the rest. You just have to step out and take a step. I've heard it said that faith is like an apple in the middle of a table. You can believe there's faith on the table. You can look at it. Maybe if it's fruity enough, you can get a smell of it. Until you take a bite, you won't know.
You don't really know it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, that goes all the way back to Pastor Erickson when I was in 3rd grade. That's a long time living with that idea. And I think that's the big picture, is start doing something and then let God direct it from there, and it'll happen. God will do things. Pastor Randy Steele used to say, a God sighting.
Yeah.
And you'll see them and you'll know them. And there you go. There's 30 seconds at least.
Yeah, a little more than 30 seconds. Wow. So as I wrap up and I say what I'm hoping for in this podcast is to create pathways to greatness, for people to think bigger than, like, we're not on this earth to be average. God didn't do that. That would be foolish to assume he did.
Yeah.
So greatness is in us. He put us here for that. Can we sum it up and just say, take a bite?
Yeah.
Because you won't know. You won't know what it tastes like until you do.
Yep.
And I think that same way about greatness.
Yeah.
So I'll finish out by saying what I always say. Now go be great.
Go be great.